This segment is brought to you by Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. All right, it's that time again. It's Good Vibes time. Martin Foss along with Debbie Cox, the Nova. She is in the house. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
All right, so I saw the topic. Now, this could be all across the board.
Yes.
Overcoming addiction.
Yes.
Before we get started, I know what my addiction is. I'll tell you later in the show, but does everyone have an addiction?
Well, we are all susceptible to addiction. To say that not everyone has an addiction, but it takes a lot of intention into today's world not to have some sort of addiction. And we're all prone to addiction at different levels. And so we can kind of talk about some of the risk factors that make people more susceptible. But I think in general, we need to have a better understanding of what drives addiction to begin with. I watched a really interesting TED Talk by a man named Johann Hari, and he was very curious about the nature of addiction and the way that we're treating it as a society. At the time of the talk, he said it's been 100 years since we basically criminalized drug use, for example. And the way that we treat drug addicts is that when we find out that they're using or when they're struggling with addiction, we tend to shame them, we stigmatize them, we punish them, we leave them with criminal records. And he wanted to know, is this actually helping the problem or hurting the problem? For all intents and purposes, what we've been doing for the 100 years doesn't appear to be working. So he went all over the place interviewing. And what was interesting is that, one of the things that he kind of assumed, and I think that all of us kind of assume, for example, is if all of a sudden we all started taking heroin 3 times a day for 20 days straight, most of us assume that we'd all become addicts after the 20 days, that there's some sort of chemical hooks in the heroin itself that would make us addicted. But as it turns out, he actually went and discovered that when, for example, you get into a car accident and you break your hip, right? Or grandmother breaks her hip, right? When they go into the hospital, they actually get the cleanest form of heroin there is, diamorphine, and it's given to them for several days straight, and it's highly unlikely for people to come out of that experience addicted to heroin. So he was like, "Oh, that's interesting. I thought it was just a chemical hook kind of thing." Now, there was an experiment done where rats were put into a cage, and they were given the option between regular water or water that was spiked with heroin or cocaine, drug water, essentially. And in all cases, 100% of the time, when the experiment was first launched, the rats preferred the drug water and would actually quite quickly kill themselves on it. So they would drink it just as we would probably predict. It was very addictive, so they preferred it, and then they killed themselves on it. Now, experimenters started going, okay, but wait, there's really nothing else in the cage except for the water. So they actually conducted an experiment where they put the rats in something called rat parks. There's like a haven for rats, okay? Again, the same thing. They're offered the regular water and the drug water, but instead of just being in a regular cage, they have friends, lots of friends around. They have cheese, they have tunnels, they have a life, a really rich and full life. Did you know that in this experiment, not only did the rats not prefer the drug water, they hardly ever drank from it. When they did, they hardly ever drank compulsively. In fact, what they preferred was to actually be connected in Rat Park. And humans are not unlike this. Actually, there was a corollary experiment done with humans. What was found was that 20% of Vietnam soldiers were actually taking heroin while they were in the war. So there was a big concern that they were going to come back and we're going to have a bunch of addicts on our hands. But actually, when they followed these soldiers back home, when they were removed from the conditions that were driving the addiction to begin with, 95% of them just quit. They didn't have to go to rehab.
So it was a coping mechanism for them to take the heroin.
Yeah. So what researchers are actually coming to is that it appears as though instead of addiction, we should be calling it bonding, because human beings, by nature, we want to bond with other human beings. In the absence of the ability to bond with other humans because of trauma, because of abusive situations, because of internal mechanisms that are keeping us from actually connecting, what we will do is we'll bond with something or someone that is going to give us relief. So the bonding actually provides relief. And so if we can't have the kind of bonding that we're designed for, what we tend to do is go towards something that's actually going to make us feel better. And so and especially when you're using this as an avoidance mechanism, I think we've talked about this before, a lot of the people that I work with, they are so in avoidance of something internally. They don't want to be present with it. They can't stand to be present in the conditions of their lives, is what the researchers said. They can't stand it so much that they pick something to bury themselves in, to escape into. It could be social media, could be shopping, could be eating, could be drinking, could be doing drugs, okay? They find themselves a place to hide or distract or avoid. And because they are in avoidance, they keep going back to that thing to make them feel better, which of course drives addiction. Now, in the absence of intervention, and not the kind of intervention that we're used to, right? In regular intervention, like we're all gonna get together, we're gonna tell you what the impact this has had on our lives. And we're basically going to set an ultimatum. It's the drug use or our connection. So you're actually putting at risk.
Keith Urban.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're putting at risk the very connection that is needed for them to actually recover. And I know we don't have time before the break, but after the break, I would like to show you, to tell you when they experimented on it, what actually happened in Portugal, which is the only place that has decriminalized drug use.
Can't win.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. All right. We'll be right back. Don't go away. This segment was brought to you by Terrebonne Ford. Built Ford tough. All right, we're back with Debbie Cox DeNova. It's Good Vibes time. We're talking about overcoming addiction. Now, you were about to get to a Portugal story.
Yeah.
You said they tried some experiment?
Yeah. So Portugal in the year 2000 had one of the worst drug problems in Europe. And so 1% of their population was actually addicted to heroin, which is crazy. They got together and they said, and they were basically employing all of the things that we use here in the West. So shaming, criminalizing, punishing, stigma, creating a criminal record. They came together, we can't keep going like this, we got to do something. And so what they decided to do was decriminalize it all. Everything from cannabis to cocaine, decriminalized. But what their plan was is instead of the money that we were using before to create disconnect from people who are in addiction, we're actually going to use that money toward reconnecting them into society. So yes, the same things that we have here in the in the United States, therapy and rehab, but very importantly, also they were setting them up for microloans for small businesses so they could actually start their own business when they come out, and job support, so actually incentivizing employers to hire people who were coming out of addiction. And what they found was very interesting, because when they talked to the people who were coming out of this, as their sense of purpose in life rose, they actually had less of a desire to go into their addictive behaviors. And after 15 years, the data was in, and the addiction had dropped by 50%. Portugal did not want to go back.
So 0.05 out of 100.
Yeah, so it was super, super effective. So one of the things that was said in this TED Talk is that, we think that the opposite of sobriety is addiction, but actually, or I'm sorry, the opposite of addiction is sobriety, but actually the opposite of addiction is connection. Bonding. It's what we're designed to do. So if you have someone who's an addict in your life, to remember that yes, it's difficult to love an addict. It absolutely is. And in a lot of cases, if you're in harm's way, you really do need to remove yourself. But being able to love and really compassionately lean in to them and actually let them know you're not alone. You're not alone. Let's get you some help about what is going on here is a really important factor. It'll actually increase the chances that they will be able to overcome that addiction for themselves. Now, do you want me to guess your addiction before we move on?
Not yet.
Okay.
I was just going to say, how many people actually know what their addiction is?
I believe that a lot of people are aware to some degree, but in many cases, as you well know, denial is a big factor, right? It's like, it's not a problem. I have it handled. But underneath it, we all kind of know when something's compulsively driving us in a way that we don't have control over. And for a lot of us, we're not getting a lot of negative feedback from society for it, because it's things like, being a workaholic or social media scrolling, which everybody is doing. So it feels almost like, okay, I've got this handled. The problem, though, is that there is, and we've talked about this before, there is sort of this tonic baseline for our dopamine. And remember, dopamine is that neurotransmitter that's responsible for, yes, pleasure, motivation, but also movement. So it compulses you to move, right? And so what happens is that when there's a tonic baseline of dopamine that's actually released in our systems. And when we go into pleasure, it's an increase in the dopamine. And we go into pain, then pleasure and pain are co-located in the brain. So it will actually lower the dopamine. Now, our society is full of ways that we can actually just keep hitting that pleasure button. We talked about that, right? And so what happens is that it's like a seesaw. What happens is that when you overload on the dopamine over and over and over again, there's a come down. So your brain basically wants to reach homeostasis. It's kind of like a seesaw. Too much pleasure, and especially the kind that we're not built for, and your brain's gonna wanna hit that pain button to actually bring you to homeostasis. But when the pain happens, what we tend to do is like, oh, well, give me more. I watched a show on Netflix. It was a really good show. And then the show is over, and I'm like, hit another one, right? Or I just had a donut.
I like it.
Yeah. And so what happens is that instead of actually coming down to homeostasis, you're overloading on the pleasure side, which can actually lower that tonic baseline of happiness for you. So a lot of people are finding themselves depressed and not understanding that the reason is that they're overloading on pleasure. So the experts say, take 30 days and just do not go for the thing that you're actually addicted to. Go cold turkey for 30 days. It's going to stink for the first 2 weeks. It's actually going to get worse before it gets better. But if you can ride the wave, remember we talked about urge surfing. If you can understand this is a normal process of my body regulating, and you can know that urges, just like every other emotion, they'll come up like a wave and then they'll come down. So you can feel it without compulsively acting on it.
My addiction is not more for enjoyment, it's more for contentment.
Oh. Interesting.
So I can do it all the time and not get super high, but it brings me joy and contentment.
Is it work?
It is work, but it's also doing construction.
Oh.
Being on the Bobcat, moving dirt, my mind just frees up.
So are you compulsively wanting to do this?
Work, yes.
Work,
yes. Yeah.
But maybe workaholism is a thing, and then this is one way that you prefer. Because if it's compulsive, that's when you know there's an addiction at play.
Everybody always says, "Come fishing with us." Come on, why you don't fish and hunt? I say, because I love to work.
Yeah.
So that's my fishing and hunting.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, that's a very good example. And a lot of people are doing that. And then, of course, we get praised for that, right?
Yeah.
So and if you have a high impulsivity, by the way, in life, you're actually much more susceptible to addiction. So that's something to know about yourself, is that like it'll be a scratch, an itch that you can't, I'm trying not to scratch it. I'm not trying to, it's kind of like that impulsive feeling.
All right. Can't wait till next week.
Yes.
See you later. All right. We'll see you later. This segment was brought to you by St. Martin and Bourke. Know your rights.